The internet didn't blink, it pounced. One podcast clip, one guest booking, and suddenly Angel Reese was standing in the middle of a storm she never saw coming. This wasn't trash talk. This wasn't a box score debate. This was pop culture colliding with women's basketball at full speed, and the impact felt humiliating in real time. As Taylor Swift's orbit brushed the WNBA conversation, millions of Swifties poured in. Timelines flooded, and Caitlin Clark's name rose like a shield Angel couldn't break through. Screenshots spread, old moments resurfaced. The narrative flipped before anyone could slow it down. Angel tried to laugh it off, paint her nails, posture through the chaos, but the noise was deafening. Every tweet felt like a verdict. Every meme felt personal. Fans didn't argue anymore. They chose sides. And when Swifties chose Caitlin Clark, the message landed hard. Silence wins. Spectacle bleeds. Angel's confidence, once her armor, suddenly looked like exposure. Inside the league, whispers grew louder. Endorsements, optics, locker room pressure, everything tightened at once. This wasn't about losing a rivalry, it was about losing control. Because in the modern sports economy, attention isn't power, alignment is. And alignment just shifted away from Angel in front of millions. The cruelest part, Caitlin Clark didn't say a word. No clapback, no response, just gravity. As the internet crowned a new center of attention, Angel felt the weight of IT public and unforgiving. A smart move became a breaking point. One question lingered. Did everything just change? Right now, nobody knows yet. Long before Swifties flooded timelines and Caitlin Clark became a pop culture magnet, Angel Reese learned how to survive in noise. Her rise wasn't quiet. It was loud, emotional, defiant, and unapologetic from the start. At LSU, she didn't just win, she challenged people to look at her while she did it. Every stare, every gesture, every moment of confidence became a headline. Some loved it, others hated it. Angel absorbed both and turned attention into fuel. In a system that rarely rewarded women's basketball with equal respect, visibility felt like power. By the time she reached the WNBA, Angel already understood one brutal truth: performance alone wasn't enough. You had to control the narrative or get swallowed by it. So she leaned into personality, branding, voice. She spoke openly about money, about the league, about building something bigger than basketball. The podcast wasn't random, it was strategy. A place where she could speak freely, stay relevant year-round, and build cultural weight beyond the court. To Angel, this wasn't ego. It was survival in a league that still struggled to protect its stars. But that survival instinct came with pressure. Angel didn't just feel expected to win, she felt expected to matter, to trend, to generate conversation. Silence felt dangerous. Being ignored felt worse than being criticized. And over time, that pressure hardened into a habit. Stir the pot, own the moment, stay in the spotlight. It worked until it didn't. Single quotes T. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's rise followed a different path. Fewer words, cleaner image, a game that translated instantly to mainstream audiences. She didn't need to provoke to be visible. She didn't need controversy to be relevant. The attention followed her naturally, and that contrast lingered in the background of every comparison. Angel noticed it, fans noticed it, media noticed it, and even when the rivalry felt playful, the imbalance in perception was real. Angel carried more than competitive tension, she carried expectation. Fans projected symbolism onto her, critics projected resentment. Every move felt heavier because it wasn't just about basketball, it was about identity, representation, and control. And when you carry that much weight, mistakes don't land softly. The podcast became an outlet, but also a risk. Conversations blurred, jokes landed harder than expected. Guests brought new audiences with unpredictable loyalties. Angel believed she could handle it. She had handled worse. But this time, the scale was different. She wasn't dealing with sports fans. She was stepping into pop culture's most aggressive ecosystem without a shield. Emotionally, Angel wasn't reckless, she was tired. Tired of being measured differently. Tired of feeling like she had to perform confidence just to maintain ground. That exhaustion made her trust her instincts more than the consequences. And instincts shaped by constant scrutiny don't always calculate collateral damage. So when the moment came, the guest, the comments, the crossover, Angel didn't see a trap. She saw another opportunity to stay visible, another move in a long game she'd been playing since college. What she didn't see was how quickly the rules could change when the audience multiplies overnight. Because when attention shifts from competitive to cultural, the margin for error disappears. And Angel Reese was about to learn that some crowds don't argue, they decide. And once they decide, there's no timeout. The moment the episode dropped, the math changed. Angel Reese thought she was stirring a familiar rivalry, tapping into the same competitive energy that had followed her since college. A calculated spark, a controlled controversy. But the algorithm didn't care about intention, it cared about scale. And within hours, the audience multiplied beyond anything the WNBA discourse had ever seen. The Swifties arrived first curious, protective, coordinated, then came the Clark fans. Then came everyone else. Two ecosystems merged, and Angel was suddenly standing in the middle of a crowd that didn't play by sports rules. Clips were sliced and shared out of context. Old posts resurfaced. Screenshots, stacked like evidence. What Angel framed as conversation was reframed as provocation, and the internet's verdict moved faster than any explanation could. Swift's orbit is different. It doesn't debate, it mobilizes. Within a single news cycle, Caitlin Clark's name surged, not because she said anything, but because she represented the opposite of chaos. Clean, quiet, unbothered. That contrast became the story. Then the first shocking twist landed. The backlash didn't just target Angel, it elevated Caitlin. Swifties didn't merely defend Clark. They adopted her, declared her their own. Memes crowned her, headlines followed. Sports talk bled into pop culture panels. Suddenly, basketball stats were being explained to music fans, and the bridge between fandoms locked into place. Angel's attempt to pull attention inward did the opposite. It redirected gravity. Angel felt it immediately. The tone online shifted from rivalry to ridicule, from disagreement to dominance. Her paint-the-nails bravado read differently now, less fearless, more defiant. She admitted the chaos impacted her, and that honesty once her strength was seized as proof of vulnerability. The internet is merciless with vulnerability. It doesn't soothe it, it amplifies it. Inside the league, the consequences tightened. Endorsement chatter cooled. PR teams monitored sentiment. Every appearance became risk assessment. Angel wasn't just a player anymore. She was a headline risk. Locker room dynamics grew tense, not because of conflict, but because attention brings pressure. Teammates answer questions they didn't ask for. Coaches manage distractions they can't control. And Angel, used to carrying the noise, now felt it pressing inward. The cruelest part remained Caitlin's silence. No response. No jab, no acknowledgement. The internet filled that silence with praise, projecting grace and dominance onto it. In a media economy, silence can be strategy, or it can be interpreted as superiority. Either way, it worked. Each hour without a reaction made the contrast sharper. Angel talked, Caitlin didn't. The audience decided which they preferred. The first twist hardened into a new reality. Angel Reese wasn't losing a debate, she was losing alignment. Pop culture doesn't negotiate, it anoints, and in this moment, it anointed Caitlin Clark as the safe, celebratory figure and Angel as the lightning rod. That shift carried career implications beyond likes and retweets. Sponsors watch sentiment, networks watch crossover appeal. And this crossover didn't break Angel's way. As the clips kept circulating, Angel faced a choice she didn't expect to confront so soon. Double down and risk being framed as combative, or pull back and risk being framed as shaken. Either path carried consequences. The audience had grown too big to please, and too fast to steer by the end of the cycle. One truth settled in. The fight wasn't on the court anymore. It was in culture, and culture had just moved the goalposts. The question now wasn't whether Angel could respond. It was whether any response would change what had already been decided. Once the Swifties locked in, there was no deal. What followed felt less like backlash and more like a coordinated takeover. Timelines transformed overnight. Hashtags shifted. Accounts that had never tweeted about basketball suddenly spoke fluent pick and roll. Caitlin Clark highlights flooded feeds alongside Taylor Swift references, tour photos, lyric memes, and crowdsourced stat breakdowns. The crossover wasn't casual, it was complete. And Angel Reese was watching the center of gravity move away from her in real time. The second escalation came fast and hit harder. Mainstream media jumped in. Not sports media, culture media, morning shows, pop culture blogs, commentary spaces that never covered the WNBA before suddenly framed the story as a lesson in clout and consequences. The narrative sharpened. Angel wasn't portrayed as a competitor anymore. She was framed as the instigator who woke the wrong audience. That framing stuck. And once it stuck, it spread. Inside brand circles, the temperature dropped. Not cancellations, caution. Meetings paused. Timelines extended. Let's see how this plays out, became the default answer. That's the quiet language of risk management. And it's deadly in an attention economy that rewards momentum. Angel's name now carried volatility, and volatility scares people who write checks. Then came the second major twist, the one that truly boxed her in. Swift herself didn't respond. No tweet, no mention, no acknowledgement, and that silence became symbolic. Fans read it as approval. Analysts framed it as endorsement by omission. Caitlin Clark, already likened to Taylor Swift in tennis shoes, benefited from the halo without ever stepping into the ring. Silence didn't just protect her, it elevated her. The imbalance became impossible to ignore. Angel posted, reacted, explained. Caitlin played, smiled, and stayed quiet. The contrast went viral. One was framed as emotional, the other as composed. One as reactive, the other as inevitable. Those labels aren't fair, but they are powerful. And once they attach, they are hard to shake. Locker room pressure intensified. Angel's presence now came with a media cloud that followed the team everywhere. Reporters asked pop culture questions in basketball spaces. Teammates fielded questions about fandoms instead of rotations. Coaches tried to redirect, but attention doesn't listen to game plans. Angel felt the weight shift from competition to containment. Every move felt like it could be misread. Every silence felt like surrender. Online, the Swifties didn't just criticize, they organized. They corrected narratives. They boosted Clark content. They drowned out counterpoints with sheer volume. This wasn't a feud anymore. It was an algorithmic landslide. And the more Angel pushed back, the more the story hardened into a morality play about knowing your lane. That's when the tone around Angel changed again, from challenger to cautionary tale. Commentators stopped asking who won the rivalry and started asking whether Angel had overplayed her hand. Had she mistaken buzz for leverage? Had she underestimated how quickly pop culture crowns favorites? Those questions didn't come from hate. They came from observation. And they landed like verdicts. Behind the scenes, advisors urged restraint. Less posting, fewer reactions. Let the cycle burn out. But burnouts require oxygen to disappear, and this fire was being fed by millions. Angel faced a brutal paradox. Engagement kept her visible but also kept the wound open. Silence might cool the story, but it could also confirm the narrative. Others were writing for her. The escalation reached its peak when fans openly declared allegiance shifts. Not just liking Caitlin, choosing her vibe, her quiet, her perceived safety. In culture wars, choice is power, and the power had moved. Angel Reese wasn't collapsing. She was recalibrating under pressure few athletes ever face. The stage had grown too big, too fast, and the audience wasn't waiting for nuance. They wanted symbols, and symbols don't get second drafts. As the dust thickened, one thing became clear. This wasn't a momentary spike. It was a structural shift in who the culture wanted to carry forward, and with that realization settling in, the fallout was about to turn deeply personal. The fallout hit like a tidal wave, and there was nowhere to stand that felt safe. Angel Reese didn't just lose control of a moment, she lost control of the room. Comment sections turned hostile, memes multiplied by the hour. The tone online hardened from debate to judgment, and once judgment sets in, empathy disappears. Fans weren't analyzing basketball anymore. They were analyzing character. Screenshots of Angel's past confidence were reframed as arrogance. Her honesty was twisted into insecurity. Every expression became evidence in a trial she never agreed to attend. Inside WNBA spaces, the atmosphere shifted. Teammates felt the gravity. Coaches felt the distraction. Press conferences became minefields where pop culture questions crowded out basketball ones. Angel's name drew cameras before tip-off. Not for her stat line, but for the chaos trailing behind her. That kind of attention is exhausting. It doesn't roar, it hums constantly, drilling into focus, draining emotional energy before the game even starts. Emotionally, the weight showed. Angel admitted the online chaos impacted her, and that admission meant to humanize was seized upon. Critics called it weakness. Supporters called it unfair. The internet called it content. Vulnerability became a spectacle, and in a culture addicted to reaction, spectacle spreads faster than understanding. Angel's attempts to steady the narrative only amplified it. Silence felt like surrender. Speaking felt like provocation. There was no clean exit. Sponsors watched closely. Not with outrage, with caution. Volatility triggers review. Review slows momentum. Momentum matters. Even whispers of hesitation can cool opportunities, and the pause was noticeable. The language around Angel shifted from bold to risky, from magnetic to polarizing. Those labels carry weight in rooms where decisions are made quietly and quickly. The comparison cycle intensified. Caitlin Clark's quiet became louder by contrast. Every non-response was framed as composure, every basket as inevitability. Fans projected values onto silence, discipline, humility, grace, and projected chaos onto engagement. The imbalance wasn't about truth, it was about perception. And perception, once set, is stubborn. Angels supporters rallied, but their voices struggled against scale. Swifties don't argue, they overwhelm. The feed told a clear story. Cultural alignment had shifted. Angel felt it in real time when posts were drowned out, when replies flooded with sarcasm, when praise was buried under jokes that stung because they stuck. The humiliation wasn't a single moment, it was accumulation. 1,000 tiny cuts delivered by a crowd too big to address. Behind closed doors, the toll was heavier. Being strong in public requires space to be fragile in private, and that space shrank. Advisors urged restraint, friends urged rest. The season didn't pause, the schedule didn't soften. Angel still had to compete, to lead, to perform under lights while her name trended for reasons she couldn't control. That pressure doesn't just test skill, it tests identity. The league maintained distance. No statements, no shields. That silence echoed. Angel had built her brand on self-determination, and now she had to live it alone. Independence is empowering until it becomes isolating. And isolation, paired with scrutiny, bends even the toughest resolve by the time the noise reached its loudest pitch. The public wasn't asking who started it anymore. They were asking who could withstand it. Angel Reese wasn't finished, but she was undeniably shaken. The fallout had carved a new reality where every move carried extra weight, and every misstep would be magnified. As the dust refused to settle, one truth hovered uncomfortably close. The next move wouldn't be about winning a game, it would be about reclaiming control if that was still possible. It would be about reclaiming control if that was still possible. Just when it felt like the storm couldn't get louder, the most dangerous shift happened quietly. The outrage cooled not because it ended, but because it settled into something colder. Acceptance, the kind that locks narratives in place and moves on without you. That's when Angel Reese realized the real threat wasn't the Swifties, the memes, or even the comparisons. It was the freeze. When the internet stops yelling, it's usually because it has chosen. Behind the scenes, the calculus changed. Advisors stopped talking about responses and started talking about restraint. Less posting, fewer reactions, no more feeding the cycle. The strategy wasn't to win the moment, it was to survive it. But survival in the spotlight demands something brutal, letting others tell your story while you stay quiet. For a player whose power came from presence, that silence felt like suffocation. Then came the twist. No one expected to matter, and yet it did. A subtle shift in coverage. Headlines stopped naming Angel first. Caitlin Clark's performances led the conversation, not because Angel wasn't playing but because culture had already decided who it wanted to carry forward. The crossover audience stayed, but their focus didn't. Swifties didn't linger for debate, they lingered for comfort. And comfort, in this narrative, wasn't Angel's lane. The humiliation wasn't a public scolding, it was displacement. Watching attention migrate while you're still standing on the same stage. Watching praise accumulate elsewhere without confrontation. Caitlin didn't need to respond because the audience did it for her. Silence became the loudest endorsement in the room. Angel faced a crossroads sharper than any defender. Double down on edge and risk being framed as combative. Pull back and risk being labeled broken. Rebrand and risk losing the audience that loved her fire. Do nothing and risk the narrative hardening without her fingerprints on it. Each path carried loss. Each demanded a version of surrender. And hovering above it all was a harder truth in the modern sports economy. Cultural alignment can outweigh performance. You can be right and still be outmatched. You can be talented and still be sidelined by a story bigger than the game. Angel hadn't lost her skill. She hadn't lost her work ethic. But she had collided with a force that doesn't play defense-only offense. Scale and timing. The whispers started turning strategic. Would a quieter season reset perception? Would a statement carefully crafted risk reopening wounds? Would winning loudly force the narrative back to basketball? Or had the window already narrowed to something smaller and colder? Wait it out and hope the crowd moves on. Angel Reese stood in that uncertainty, not defeated but exposed. The confidence that once protected her now demanded recalibration, because the next move couldn't be emotional, it had to be surgical, and surgery leaves scars. The final twist wasn't that Angel was done, it was that the game had changed. Mid-play. And as the lights dimmed on one chapter and burned brighter on another, a single question cut through the noise with surgical clarity. Will Angel Reese redefine herself on her own terms, or will culture finish the job it already started? Now it's your turn to decide how this story ends, because the ending hasn't been written yet. Angel Reese isn't a headline, she's a case study in how fast culture can turn, how ruthless scale can be, and how one moment can redraw the map of an entire career. So don't just scroll past this like it's gossip. Engage with it, think about it, argue about it. Was this a miscalculation that spiraled out of control, or a calculated risk that exposed an uncomfortable truth about power, fandom, and who gets protected? Did Angel Reese poke the wrong giantor? Did the culture simply reveal who it was always ready to crown? And more importantly, should athletes even be expected to navigate pop culture warfare just to play their sport? Drop your real opinion in the comments, not the safe one. Not the one you think everyone else wants to hear. Say what you actually believe, because these debates shape narratives faster than any press release ever could. If you want more unfiltered, high-stakes WNBA stories that go beyond box scores and expose the pressure, politics, money, and culture shaping women's basketball right now, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next chapter in this rivalry won't be announced, it'll unfold. And when it does, you'll want to be watching. You'll want to be watching.